Thank you for joining us. I'm Stacy Holloran with ControlScan, and I have with me today Susan Matt, CEO of ThoughtKey. Susan and I today are going to be discussing acquirers' strategies in relation to the key findings from the third annual survey of the acquirer's perspective on Level 4 merchant PCI compliance. This survey was recently conducted by ControlScan in partnership with the Merchant Acquirers Committee. Level 4 merchants make up approximately 98% of the overall U.S. merchant base. And we know that they're typically comprised of small to mid-sized businesses. Based on the results of our acquirer survey and our recent merchant survey, we also know that Level 4 merchants' awareness of the PCI DSS, that is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, is at about 69%. And that Level 4 merchants' PCI compliance validation rate is about 40%. While those numbers represent increases over previous years, it's obvious that more work needs to be done. Susan, looking at the results of the recent acquirer study, what surprised you the most about the way acquirers are interacting with their Level 4 merchant base from a PCI perspective?
That acquirers are still using the very common approach to communicate to the masses for PCI compliance. And coupled with the merchant survey, we know that that's not what merchants want or need, and is certainly not tailored as a value add to their specific environment.
Right. Why do you think acquirers are still taking this single generalized approach?
State of the economy over the past couple of years, and as the economy returns back to some state of normalcy, they've got conflicting internal objectives that acquirers just simply have limited resources to expend towards PCI compliant. And the limited resources are both cash and people, and as a result the acquirers are taking the fastest approach, which in the short term, it certainly can be less costly, but over the long term, we know based on the statistics, is not effective for sustainable results.
Okay. So given these constraints and your expertise in risk mitigation, what do you advise acquirers to do?
Right, to maximize their limited resources, to deploy where the effort is needed to get their biggest bang for their buck, and really look at it from three core goals. The mandates as defined by the card brands, program cost effectiveness, and merchant value add. And look at those as a pyramid, if you will, with the mandates being the foundation, program parameters built on that foundation, and then determining what's basically deployed to the merchant based on those program parameters to have both cost effectiveness and value add.
Okay. So tell me a little more about those goals.
So the goals all go hand in hand for a strategic focus and can be managed accordingly. And this strategy includes pulling together key data points, and those data points include point of sale communication type, industry segment, firmware and software versions, which are all important for PCI compliance, and then of course use of third parties. And then using this data set, this collection of information, to risk rank the merchants from high, medium, and low based on the risk of data compromise. And it's also important just to understand that risk categorization is different than what they traditionally know as transaction risk or fraud, which is how they manage their monitoring system. A lot of overlap between the two, but they are two different calculations which can go hand in hand.
Gotcha. Well, we've seen, based on the study results, that acquirers are probably not taking the best advantage of PCI risk-reducing technologies and services. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, it ties nicely in with the strategy statement. They're doing the mass communication, and merchants simply can't hear the message because it's not tailored to what they both want and what they need. And so as a result, you're getting a less effective program, not as many merchants compliant. So acquirers are going to need to reanalyze their strategy, tailor their communications. They're going to need to identify the PCI scope reduction and risk reducing technologies that they're going to deploy. Now the merchants can hear the message and perhaps act a little bit quicker. You get higher compliance results, and you've got your merchant value add statement in there, as well as a cost-effective program.
Excellent. So what kind of tools do you suggest that acquirers look into?
Right, so when we talk about both scope reduction and risk reduction technology, just three most common are end-to-end encryption, tokenization, and hosted solutions. There are a lot of them out there. Merchant segmentation is another great piece of advice if it works for that particular environment.
Given all that's out there, how do you suggest the acquirers, kind of bring it in and focus their efforts?
I'm a firm believer in the hosted payment solutions. I think you get two components. You get the PCI scope reduction, and you get risk reduction as it relates to their technology. So that is the most effective, and also important that they use a compliant provider for their hosted solution. If not, they'll introduce more risk into their environment, and then that provider is registered. So that would be where I would recommend they focus.
Wonderful. Well, Susan, I appreciate your time today. Those are some great thoughts, and I think they'll really help acquirers to move into the new year with some strategy behind their PCI compliance programs. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.